Good to see you. Welcome to Perfect Cocktail Pursuits. My name is Rosalina Africano, and I'm your host. Today, I'm connecting with Derek Brown. We saw each other in New Orleans, and we agreed there were so many people to see in New Orleans, and since we're home, we would make a time to see one another once we got home, and here we are.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Derek has agreed to sit and chat with me today. I'm really interested in chatting about his book called Mindful Mixology. While we were at Tales, it was a recurring theme.
That's right.
Low ABV, no ABV cocktails. And welcome.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm really glad to be here, and it's nice. It was nice to see you in New Orleans. It's nice to see you here, and it's definitely like it was an interesting sort of sea change for Tales of the Cocktail. I mean, I think in the past they had already started to incorporate some no and low ABV programming. So I don't, and by that I mean cocktails that have less or no alcohol.
Right.
You know? So it wasn't that they didn't already have that direction in there, but it was such a tiny piece of it. And this one, when you walk right through the door, you got a non-alcoholic. Did you get that when you?
I did.
Non-alcoholic
something refreshing.
Cocktail. Yes. And I think that like set the tone for like, hey, you have choices here.
You'll have to remind me of the lady's name who was the keynote speaker. Mm-hmm. She talked about the fact that people like to use no and low ABV cocktails to kind of monitor their level of intoxication over an evening. And I just thought that was brilliant because I tend to do it by swigging as much water as I can in between drinks in order to make sure that I'm grounded.
That's right, yeah. So her name is Brandy Rand, and she is the in charge of the IWSR, which does a lot of the research on trends in alcohol and low and no ABV now too. And she used the term, which you're referring to as tempo drinking. Tempo drinking,
yeah. That was really fascinating to actually be able to put a word to it.
Well, it's really just like, you know, what she was suggesting is that this is already a part of people's behavior, especially Gen Z and millennials, where they are starting to say, look, I want to stay in this experience. Like, I really love hanging out, enjoying this, but I don't love the experience of getting trashed and waking up the next morning.
The next morning is not friendly.
Yeah, to say the least. Yeah. So I think it's like, okay, but what if I had choices? So I can drink a non-alcoholic drink to start out with. I can have a full alcohol drink or you know, whatever is a standard pour, and then I could do a low alcohol, then I could do a no alcohol. So I can kind of not just choose like what level of intoxication, but choose really how I want to feel, you know, which I think is what it's about. You know, I think for some people there's this idea when they hear the word no and low alcohol cocktails, they're like, okay, you're trying to stop me from doing something, which is not accurate in my case. I'm sure there are people like that, but what I think is important and what I think is growing is this idea that like you have a right to choose how you want to feel. And so far in bars we've really had one way, you know, and that doesn't mean that, you know, that way can't continue, but there should be other choices built around that.
I like the thoughtfulness that goes into that process because, to be honest, you know, the exposure that I had to drinking at a young age was how drunk could you get, how quickly, and how many shots could you do, and you know, it was a race, it was a contest, but boy did you feel it. And so it's a much more grounded and thoughtful way to move through an evening and last through the evening, so you can definitely stay in the experience. I like the way that sounds.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, you know, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too far because I know we just jumped right into it, but I think that's the nature of our relationship. But I think that when we are young, a lot of people in America, and I can't speak for the rest of the world because I didn't grow up there, but in America, we learned nothing about how to drink. You know, we either learned, you know, don't do it, right? Abstinence. Or we learned like, you know, in inappropriate ways. You know, like I learned from siblings in some cases how to drink, and they were not much older than me, and they were experimenting on their own, and they had learned from friends and other people too. So when those relationships get passed down and people just they haven't stopped to think, how do I drink? Like how do I approach this? Because it's not water.
Well, you certainly only have that
else,
awareness as you mature.
Right.
Awareness comes through all portions of your life. But we're talking about alcohol, and you start to realize, well, maybe a little water is wise to stay hydrated, because I won't feel, as tough tomorrow, as rough tomorrow, as it were. So Derek and I have been in each other's circles over the years because Derek has always had his pulse on cocktail culture in DC, as far as I'm concerned. I first visited him at the Columbia Room when it was in the Passenger. And the Passenger, was a really cool neighborhood bar right next to the convention center. I remember Eleanor Holmes Norton used to come through and catch a drink and place bets with other politicians.
Right, yeah, and take shots with us. So.
And then I also remember that you went through a series of pop-up bars that were really interesting. The Game of Thrones pop-up bar was really, really popular, and everybody in town passed through those doors so they could take a picture on that fantastic throne.
Yeah, in the course of a month, we had almost 90,000 people come through. And there were sometimes lines to the Game of Thrones pub, as we got a pop-up bar, for 7 to 8 hours. So people would wait 8 hours in line to spend maybe an hour and a half in there, get a couple drinks, take some pictures, because it was really immersive. We had the fire-breathing dragon, and we had all of these. I don't even remember all of the details of it, but all of these kind of immersive scenes that you could go into. Even had a replica of the Iron Throne that people sat on.
You certainly did. It was beautiful.
Which is so funny because it was everyone's Tinder profile for in DC for an entire summer. It was hilarious. So that was really cool. And that was a great experience because up to then, a lot of the bars that I'd focused on had been more these small, intimate experiences. So translating that into this number of people,
larger than life,
and still making great cocktails was not an easy task. But I had a great team that really mastered it. To be honest with you,
Right. So we're kind of moving back and forth through the timeline to where we are today. And you still have your finger on the pulse of cocktail trends. And I'd love to talk more about how you got to writing the book, Mindful Mixology. And you have a lot of different personalities that are familiar faces who have also embraced the idea of mindful mixology, who've written thoughtful essays to bring you along on this journey and to kind of reframe the idea of no alcohol or mocktails. That seems to be not the cool thing to call low and no ABV cocktails, because we're not mocking cocktails in this instance.
No, and I think that's right. I mean, the word mocktail is fine, and I don't if somebody wants to use that, fair enough. That's what you feel comfortable with. But for me, I feel a little bit put down. If I'm hey, can I get a non-alcoholic cocktail? And it's oh yeah, we have mocktails. All of a sudden I'm oh, okay. I feel it might be sugary, it might be lemonade, it's not going to be the thoughtful, sophisticated cocktail that I'm used to. And so when we use the term non-alcoholic cocktails, I think that it presents a different picture. And there's lots of ways to frame it. People call it all kinds of things, and I suppose 20 years from now maybe we'll have another term that's the term we use. But I'm comfortable using non-alcoholic or low alcohol cocktails.
Got it. Well, today we've also we have a cocktail demonstration for you, and Derek is going to create a traditional Aperol Spritz, a low ABV alcohol spritz, and a no ABV alcohol spritz. Let's talk about some of the ingredients that you're going to use today.
Yeah, so I think one of the main things that and this is part of my book, Mindful Mixology, and this is part of my approach to it, is saying, going back to that idea of tempo drinking, you can really set the tone, and you can have a delicious drink in any iteration, whether it has alcohol, it doesn't have alcohol, it has a low amount of it. And so the Aperol Spritz, I think most people do already associate with a lower alcohol cocktail because the ABV of it is 11% alcohol. Right. One thing to consider, though, it also has a lot of Prosecco in it too, so it can range from, it's around 7% alcohol, which surprisingly enough is right around the amount of ABV or alcohol by volume that a G&T is, or gin and tonic.
Yeah, we had that thoughtful conversation because I was thinking that when it comes to choosing cocktails, you know, just out in the world, maybe an Aperol Spritz isn't my first choice because I feel like I'm going to fill up on this, you know, kind of lots of liquid drink. And, you know, it's pleasant for a light afternoon when it's hot out. But, you know, if you want something with a little more punch, that's not usually the first choice. And so I mentioned to you the fact that I might go for a G&T. Right. And I was thinking that G&T is going to have more punch because you really taste the botanicals. And I realized I'd made a mistake.
Right.
I mistook taste for ABV.
That's right. But that's part of what I tried to do in my book and show that one of the characteristics of a cocktail is intensity of flavor. That is what defines a cocktail, right? Like in a way, or part of what defines a cocktail, because in a way, when you drink a cocktail, you know it's a cocktail, right? There's no surprise there. So I think, and the gin and tonic is a great example of that. So certainly, like, yes, intensity of flavor should be there, but it doesn't have to equate to intensity of alcohol, right?
Well, let's start with the regular one.
Let me grab the book. We're going to turn to page 151, class. That I want to, you know, take the opportunity to plug my book, of course. But so basically, what we're going to do here, and I show it in the book too, is we're going to start with 3 ounces of prosecco. We're going to make a classic.
Well, let me pass this to you. Let me show the audience, that the recipe in Mindful Mixology of the Aperol Spritz. 3 ounces of prosecco.
Mm-hmm. And listen, it's a little foamy because I did not chill it enough, but we'll get there. And I will tell you this about the Aperol Spritz versus a lot of other cocktails. It's pretty forgiving. If you do 3 1/4 ounce, it will not taste bad.
Right.
You don't tell the people who are diehard enthusiasts of jiggering, but I think you'll be fine if you go a little bit over. So then we're going to use 2 ounces of Aperol. And forgive me, I'm used to making this behind a bar, so there's a little bit of a difference sitting down. I just
love
noticed.
This rich orange color that pops for the Aperol Spritz.
That's right. And then we're going to use 1 ounce of soda water.
My mouth is watering.
Mm-hmm. And I make sure that about half. Okay, great. So the next thing is to add some ice. So we've got some ice right here. And yes, of course, it goes all over the place. Remember,
all right,
folks, I'm behind a bar usually. And there we go. And
yeah, sitting down and demonstrating for a video blog is a little different.
Yeah, and this one you can just stir it with a spoon or a straw. You don't have to mix it up too much because at the end of the day, the bubbles do a lot of the work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that tastes perfect. And so we're going to take the last little bit here and do an orange. Okay. Make it look nice.
It does look nice.
And there you go. That is the Aperol Spritz. Now, we're not going to stop there. We're going to do 3 in a row because I want us to also taste it a little bit and see the differences. We're going to next do a non-alcoholic version of it. So this is Lyre's, right? Well, let's start with the non-alcoholic bubbly, which is Thompson and Scott Noughty, which is really delicious, like a non-alcoholic Chardonnay.
Non-alcoholic sparkling Chardonnay?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And where is this out of?
And this is the woman who makes it, Amanda Thompson, she's based in England.
Okay.
And she has created this awesome, almost like a grower champagne in some way, which I think tastes a little more complex and interesting than some of the, stuff that you can get. So I won't be too judgy, but I think this one is pretty awesome. And so we're going to add 3 ounces of that, just like the
regular one.
And then we're going to do 2 ounces of the Lyre's.
Now, is Lyre's low ABV or no ABV?
This is no ABV.
Okay.
So it's a little different. Look, it's not like a perfect replica. Alcohol is a magic molecule. That's what a friend of mine told me at one point. I thought it was a great way to talk about it. And so with that, you have to kind of realize that non-alcoholic drinks won't taste exactly like it, but they taste pretty close. You'll see in a minute.
Now, this color has more of an orange cranberry color in comparison to this bright orange from the Aperol. And, you know, I have a funny feeling that just based on the kinds of ingredients it takes to come up with the intensity of flavor that you're going to get in a non-alcoholic expression, you're going to need to add different ingredients.
That's right. Yeah, in some cases, I think this one's going to work out fine. You'll see and really, at the end of the day, it can be a non-alcoholic drink and not taste exactly like an alcohol drink, but still be rich, complex, and have that intensity of flavor. You know, like the way I say it in my book is I say it's about intensity of flavor. It's about that piquancy or bite, which you don't just get from alcohol. You can get from lots of other ingredients too. Sometimes it's just the bitterness.
Piquancy, new word.
Yeah.
I've been hearing cloyingly a lot.
Oh yeah, that's talk to some sommeliers and you'll hear that one a lot when it comes to like sweet drinks. And then, you know, there's also that texture that comes with with alcohol and a cocktail that has alcohol. So that's kind of an essential feature of it. And so let me get one more orange peel here, and we've got that one. And then we have one last one to make. So that's alcohol, no alcohol, and then we're going to make a low alcohol one.
Alcohol, no alcohol, and then how are you going to make the low alcohol?
So this one I'm going to use the bubbly, which is 3 ounces. That's the largest amount of alcohol.
Got it, of the ingredients.
Yeah, I'm going to use this instead. So,
okay.
So this is the Noughty, the non-alcoholic one, and I'll still use Aperol.
Okay, got it.
So that way...
You know, that color is starting to develop, maybe because of that orange slice. They're very close.
Yeah, they are remarkably close. And what your watchers and listeners won't see is that I've spilled half of this in my lap. So...
They didn't see it from this view.
So, all right. So we've got, again, I'm making these in all the exact same proportions. You can adjust it to your taste for sure. But I think it would be interesting for this experiment to just do it the same and see how it turns out. So 3, 2, 1. That's kind of the numbers to remember when you're doing an Aperol Spritz.
Yes.
3 parts Prosecco, 2 parts Aperol, and 1 part soda.
We kind of have a rainbow of oranges in color.
It's very orangey. I am tempted as a father to make an Orange You Glad joke, but I will not do it. I will not do it.
You're embracing this dad role very seriously.
I had a little backup ice here. So
awesome.
And we'll stir that one too. And then we have one more.
Now, how are you finding the use of steel straws versus paper straws? You obviously arrived with steel straws, so this is, you know, an option that you prefer over what else?
So, I mean, I think that, you know, a lot of places, DC is one of them, are actually not using plastic straws anymore. So I think it's a good option for the environment, but also it does kind of feel a little classier, you know, like I like it, but I will tell you this. When I ran the Columbia Room, which was a cocktail bar that I sold early this year, but you know, in 2017 it was the best cocktail bar in America, which I'm very proud of. Tales of the Cocktail named it that in the Spirit Awards. We always used metal straws just because it felt, I think, substantial for people and kind of classy, but they just walked out of there all the time. You know, like.
Well, at least they weren't gold-plated or something. That would really take a hit.
There. So, like, in some ways, you had to kind of include the straw to some degree in the price of a drink. But okay, so we have alcohol, the full amount, right? Mm-hmm. We have no alcohol, and we have low alcohol.
Which should we try first?
I say try the original first. So go right here.
Here we are holding on to the last hints of summer here in DC as the evenings get cold.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that tastes familiar.
Yeah. I love those.
Yeah, they're refreshing. All right, no alcohol.
No alcohol. Yeah, I figure that's the steepest drop, so let's try that to see just how different it is.
You know, it's different. It's similar in sweetness. It has more berry notes in on my palate, I think.
Yeah.
I don't get the same bubbles, but it's very close.
Yeah.
It's very close.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It definitely has a lot of the same characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It has the same weight, the same mouthfeel.
But you're right. This one, and I think it's the nature of the product, is not a perfect replica. It has a little bit more of that fruity berry notes. That's a great way to put it.
But there's nothing wrong with their berry notes. It's close.
Yeah.
But if you're going to bring the flavor in, you've got to add different ingredients in order to be able to compete, as it were. The other thing too is that the difference in the bubbles between the two could just simply be there's less bubbles in this one. It's not necessarily less flavor.
Right. And it could be also that was a little bit more watery ice or something. There's
there's so many things that go into it.
Right,
That's right.
Let's try the low alcohol. And
low
see
alcohol.
how that works for you.
That one's sweet. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, that one definitely is a little sweeter, and it's closer to the original in terms of just because it has the Aperol in there.
Right.
But they're all within I think personally, like in a very close range.
Oh, they're certainly in a very close range. And as I think about the difference between the alcohol version and the low alcohol version, the sweetness comes from the Aperol, whereas the bubbly Prosecco might offset that sweetness.
Right.
This might not do the same, have the same effect, as it were.
Well, it's interesting. Aperol is so super sweet.
Yes.
I think people forget that sometimes when they have these, but it can be almost candy-like, and it's kind of like orange candy and notes. But yeah, that's great, and that's the lineup. So I think that what's cool about this one is again about 11% alcohol, right? This one is 0% alcohol. And although I think sometimes this might have like 0.5%. I have to double check. No, it doesn't appear to. So yeah, this is all 0.0. So not even, because the legal definition of non-alcoholic is 0.5% alcohol.
Got it.
Which is kind of similar to like if you have like a ripe banana, or certain foods actually have that much alcohol. So it's not usually considered that big of a deal. But this one is 0.0, and this one would probably be about half, so maybe 5-6%. I'm sorry, this is not 11%, this is 7%. This would be about 3 or 4% alcohol.
Well, what's very clear is that there's a range. And not only is there a range, but if you go out with two people and all of you are ordering Aperol Spritzes, nobody's going to know who ordered the alcoholic one, who ordered the non-alcoholic one. And that seems to be, a thing in bars when you just want to go and hang out with your friends and not necessarily drink, and you got the club soda and lime. It's like the flag to the rest of the bar. You're not drinking.
Right, and then, one of the kind of like negative things about that is you feel like you have to tell your story.
You have to,
like,
justify
I'm not drinking
it somehow.
Tonight, and they're like, oh.
That.
Are you okay? Or like, are you an alcoholic? Or in a case of somebody who's female identifying, then it's like you're pregnant or whatever. And so I think that there's all this baggage. I'd like to see that change. I think that it should be normalized that we just order the thing we like. And people are just like, that's cool. And then you get to know somebody, and if they want to tell you their story, cool.
Well, I have to admit, I've really enjoyed being open to the idea of all of these different levels of alcohol by volume drinks, because when they started showing up on the scene, I was a little skeptical.
Yeah, fair.
But now I get it. Now I really get it, and each one has a purpose. I think it's fantastic, and boy, they're beautiful together, aren't they? I mean, they're really similar.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that I try to point out is, and especially about my book, is like, this is not necessarily for somebody in recovery per se, although that might be right for somebody in recovery from substance abuse issues. This is more the idea that people can, for whatever reason, right? Maybe it's recovery, but maybe it's just because they have a board meeting tomorrow morning, or they're running a marathon, or they're playing squash. I mean, whatever it is, they have something that is more important than being hungover. And I think for a lot
of us. How about that?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's not just focused on recovery. It's focused on anybody who wants to enjoy this experience.
For whatever reason, and you don't have to discuss it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And my own personal story, like I did go through a moment where I had a lot of questions about how I drank and how that affected me personally, right? It was, my son was born in 2014. It was shortly after that I started to realize that the lifestyle that I had was not compatible with the lifestyle that I wanted. And
right.
A lot of the quote unquote outcomes, which really means just like the shit in your life.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to ask if we could cuss on the.
Of course we can.
My health wasn't great, my finances weren't great, my social life was. I had a lot of troubles around that, and I think part of the reason for that is because I hadn't addressed aspects of my own mental health and drinking. But I started to address that, and especially the mental health portion. That's something that's very common within the bar and restaurant industry. And I started to address that, and it really turned the tide for me. And I started realizing alcohol, I don't need it.
Right.
Which makes it all the more valuable in a way. If I want it, it's there, and it can be something I enjoy. But I don't need it. And I don't need it to be happy. And I think that is something that really changed my life and led me to a point where I feel really great about promoting these choices.
Right.
So that I went through something that I wasn't really in a ditch somewhere per se, but I wasn't in the best me. And so I think that getting to that point meant for me not drinking anymore, but not ruling out that I would never drink again.
I think that the luxury of maturing, not everybody has that luxury to mature. Yeah, you also gain awareness, and you can be grounded, and you can choose where you want to be in that space, and you embrace it as opposed to what everybody else is doing around you. Right. And that's really important. And I think it looks good on you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've enjoyed it, and I think that the book tells a little bit about my story, but it's really focused on the recipes. It's really focused on the how-to,
right.
Because I think this is an area that a lot of people are learning.
Right.
All right. I mean, it's, as we learned, it's not exactly the same. In this case, it's somewhat fungible. You can kind of do the same proportions, but in other cases you might have to adjust it and do different things to make the cocktail, whether alcohol or non-alcoholic, the way you want.
Now repeat the phrase with regard to monitoring your levels. What is that called?
Tempo drinking.
Tempo drinking. Yeah. I like that phrase. Yeah. It makes all the sense in the world.
And I think that's, you can think of it almost as that is the application of mindful drinking, right? Because mindful drinking is this idea that we ask ourselves why we drink, right? And my answer to that was one thing. Your answer would be a different thing, right? And so it's not, and mindful drinking doesn't say don't drink. It says, what is your reason? And if your reason is because you feel comfortable with it, you feel happy, and this is just an extension of that. Alcohol is a wonderful piece of social technology.
Right.
It works.
Well, the other thing too is that the industry does so well because we drink when we celebrate, mm-hmm. we drink when we go to funerals, we drink when we've had a hard day, we drink right. when there's a birthday. We drink when there's a baby. We drink. Right. Yes, we are. Alcohol's not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, we've always been a pretty hard drinking culture, to be honest with you. But yeah, so it's not going anywhere soon, and there's options, and those options are abundant. Right now is an awesome time to apply this mindful approach to drinking because you have so many choices.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing your time with me today, Derek Brown. It's been enlightening.
Yeah,
it's been awesome. Enlightening. Well, this is Perfect Cocktail Pursuits. My name is Rosalina Africano, and I'm your host, and my special guest today is Derek Brown. I really appreciate your demonstration today. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It was really wonderful.
Well, let's connect again soon.
I look forward to it.
See you then. Bye.